All right, all right. Good evening, everybody. This is a video I had wanted to make for a while, but the timing is actually pretty good with it. So I'm going to go into how to set up an emergency fund in the TradFi world from your crypto earnings. I'm going to tie it all together at the end as usual. So let's get with the outlined. An emergency fund. This is what I do as a financial advisor for clients. Is it perfect? 100%? No, but it makes sense logically, and I'm going to go through the logic on each step of this. So I'm going to go over the purpose of an emergency fund. 2, I'm going to go over a strategy. And then 3, I'm going to go over the execution of it. And you'll see how that all plays out by the end of it. So first one, purpose. And this is where we need to wrap our heads around this and what the purpose of an emergency fund is. You set aside funds for an emergency, literally, outside of the disposable income from a paycheck. And I want you to think in terms of expenses and not income with an emergency fund. And I'm going to show you why as I go through the numbers. A lot of clients that I sit down with, they make 120,000 a year, and they say, I need 6 to 9 months of income. And that's a lot of money to sock away, particularly when you have all of the duties and responsibilities of anybody that is making $120,000 as homeowner, children, everything else that goes along with it. So think in terms of expenses, and by doing so and getting it up to that expense number, you're able to, by its very nature, take care of any income challenges you have in case there is a loss of a job, which is a very real part of having an emergency fund. So with the purpose of this, I'm going to split this into 2 main groups, one for renters and then the other one's for homeowners, because you have 2 diametrically opposed objectives that you're looking for with emergency funds. So let's start with renters. The biggest thing you're going to have is challenges to your car, your automobile, and any transportation issues. $500 at least for tires if you get 1 or 2 that blows out. Alternators are probably more expensive than $500, probably $1,000 or more. It's been a while since I've had to replace my alternator, so I'm not sure what the price is on that, but think of expensive. Brakes, depending on whether you just need pads or full rotors. And then, you're looking at medical bills. Trip to the ER could cost you $500 minimum. Urgent care, maybe get the cheaper version of an ER trip, but they'll take care of you. Ambulances are probably more expensive than this too. But just think, for the purpose of a renter, you're going to need a couple of thousand to cover this. Plus, like I said, if you're out of a job, you want your expenses on a monthly basis paid for, not so much the income that you were making for various reasons. Homeowner is a little bit different. You have everything that the renter has to go through, plus, a litany of things that could happen to your home. Water heater, expect to pay $2,500 or more. Electrician, when I owned a home, every friggin' time he came over, I'm writing a check for $1,000 for him to replace or fix something. Plumbers, $500. They come over and plumb, I guess. HVAC unit, the preventative maintenance on that's going to be a lot less and highly recommended to keep your HVAC unit up. But apparently these things just crap out and you're going to have to replace one. So think minimum $3,500 or more to replace it. More expensive item you're going to get is probably a roof for 10 grand, probably 20 grand, depending on the size of your home. And, another big ticket item is any foundational issues with your house. Those are going to cost a pretty penny. And also windows too. I know windows can't be an emergency unless a tree falls through it from a tornado. But, replacing your windows in your house for whatever reason, you're talking 6, 10, 15 grand, depending on the quality and where you go. And then gutters, if you're looking to replace your gutters and not just clean them out, you're talking 2 grand or more, depending on who you use. So now, with realizing that all of these things in your home should not be happening at once, unless you have Helen Keller for your home inspector and it misses everything and you buy a house and you have to replace all this stuff within just a few months. It shouldn't happen, but it's reasonable to suspect that one at a time, these things could happen on top of other things that you could be thinking about, like I said, loss of job and loss of income. But use this as a guideline on how we're going to go about this as I go into the strategy, as I move on from the purpose. So the strategy, there's 3 things I want to look for in an emergency fund. One, I want it to be liquid, because there's no point in having an emergency fund tied up in illiquid assets like real estate that you can't get a hold of. You need to convert cash into some sort of checking account. That's the first thing you're going to need to do is make sure it has liquidity with it. Two, you want it to pace historical inflation and not the clown inflation from the Biden administration from the past 4 years, but historical inflation has been roughly about 3% per year. And then anything you can do to get growth on top of that 3% inflation rate, that's I consider a bonus. So this is the strategy I think of and discuss with clients when we're looking at an emergency fund. So what I try to do is aim for 6,000 to start with, whether that's 600 a month for 10 months, 500 a month for a year, whatever it may be. Think of it in these terms, and here's how to allocate it. I put 15% in a savings account, which is very liquid because, as long as your bank isn't retarded, you can pretty much get your money from your savings account to your checking account instantaneously without a hitch. So put 1,000 in there for those minor things that do happen, like the tire blowouts and the brake jobs that you're gonna need. Half of that 6,000 should go into a municipal bond. I've spoken about municipal bonds before. The ones I offer to clients, no charges in, no charges out, and it is income tax free on any of the growth that happens there. Shove $3 of the $6,000 into municipal bonds, so you get a little bit of growth, much better than your bank, which I'll show you on the next slide. And then for that extra growth, so it kind of compounds on itself, I'd say put about a third of it into an equity income fund, $2,000 there. I've had equity income funds since 1960 that I offer for clients. I'll show you on the next screen what those rates of return are, because you want to look at what you're going to be getting on your annual rate of return when you have an emergency fund. Remember, this has to keep pace with inflation. So if you put $1,000 into a savings account in a bank, they ain't going to give a shit. So just expect you put $1,000 in there January 1st, and 1 year later you're going to have $1,000, maybe 1,001 because they give you a little bit, but it's going to be nothing. I just treat it as zero. Muni bond, depending on the one you get, the one I offer is about 2.5% average rate of return per year. So you put $3,000 into that. At the end of the year, that will grow to $3,075. It doesn't look like a lot, but is it much better than your bank account and your savings account? I would say hell yes. And the $75 isn't going to make or break anybody, but what it's going to do is it's going to compound year after year while you have this emergency fund set aside. That's where the beauty of the municipal bond comes in with this growth. And then the equity income fund, your $2,000, like I said, I've had an equity income fund since 1960. That's a 64-year track record that's averaged 9.8%. And at the end of the year, if you put your $2,000 in, you'll end up with $2,196, much better than the muni bond, definitely because it's a growth vehicle, and then definitely much better than your savings account under any circumstance. So your $6,000, all things being equal, should grow to $6,271 by the end of the year. Let's say you plopped your $6,000 in all at once and you put it in these vehicles. By the end of the year, that's what it should grow to. Now we got to figure out our rate of return on that. You earned $271 and you put 6,000 in. So what does that look like? Well, in order to figure out the rate of return, the ROR, you take your total, take out the 271 that you earned, divide it by 6,000. If you want to plug it into your calculator, just do 271, division sign 6,000. And your rate of return is 4.5% just on these three vehicles that you put it in. Or your calculator will spit out 0.0451667 or whatever it is. That's 4.5%. Now, some questions when looking at this. Is this emergency fund liquid? Yes. You have a savings account for $1,000 that instantaneously goes into your checking. And your municipal bond and your equity income fund, if you need to take 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 out of that, within 1 to 3 business days, it'll go into your bank account. Does this rate of return keep pace with 3% inflation? Yes, it does. Just by these three vehicles, we have 4.5%. That is above the 3% inflation. Now you know when your alternator price goes up or your tire prices go up, that your $6,000 is compounding and earning a rate of return on it is going to keep pace with those price inflations, that price increases. And is there any growth on top of the 3%? Yeah, absolutely. You're ahead of the game. You're 1.5% ahead of the game, which is better than just shoving in a bank account and a savings account all $6,000, and you're just losing money year after year because of inflation. So the execution part for renters, here's how I'm going to go about this. I'm going to do it differently than homeowners. Renters, once you hit that $6,000, stop putting money in and just let it compound, because after 3 years, earning that 4.5% rate of return, you'll have 6,800 in there. After 5 years, it'll be 7,500, and after 10 years, it'll be 9,400. Again, $6,000 today is not going to be $6,000 10 years from now. So you're not leaving it in a savings account to where you are now priced out of any emergency that you would have. This will keep pace with it and actually grow year after year. Now, for homeowners, we saw those lists of expenses. Probably needed about 20 grand in there to feel at least a little bit comfortable with everything else that you're going to be paying on, provided Helen Keller isn't your home inspector. But once you hit the 6,000, add about 250 a month to it. Half of it can go to the muni bond, and then the other half can go to the equity and income fund, roughly. And after 3 years, you'll have 16 grand in there. After 5 years, you'll have 24 grand. And after 10 years, you'll have 47 grand. So use this for context, because let's say 20 grand is what you're aiming for. Shove the 250 a month into this emergency fund. Sometime between years 3 and 5, you can stop putting that 250 a month in, because you'll have somewhere around 20 grand between 3 and 5 years. If you feel more comfortable with 30 grand as an emergency fund, then stop putting the 250 a month in somewhere between years 5 and 10, because based on the growth chart, sometime between years 5 and 10, you'll have 30 grand in your emergency fund. And again, it won't be perfect if you're making 120 grand and you're out of work, but it's better to have something built up there just in case. Or if you feel you need half of your income in there, just keep putting the 250 a month in, let it compound. Eventually you'll have 50, 60 grand in your emergency fund. 100% necessary? Maybe, maybe not. That's going to be your own personal tolerance for risk to decide and answer that question. But just know that at least you have a strategy here, and this is how you execute it. Now back to the strategy part. Lou Bravo did a lot of videos, and he always said, take care of your family. And the question that would come up would be, well, what does that mean exactly? This is a very good indication of probably how to take care of your family, because you may have some massive crypto runs. If you have close family members, you can set up your family's emergency funds in just $6,000 increments and either let it ride and compound once you set this up for them, or you want family members that you love dearly, I guess, but you want also them to have skin in the game with it a little bit. So you set them up on this path to get them started, and then they can put in the 125 or the 250 or the 400 a month, whatever it is, to get to the number that they're comfortable with. You learn this strategy and you teach this to them, you'll look like the financial genius of the family, which you already are because of the the play you hopefully either are in or got them in on the XRP side. And show them this video, set up their accounts, let it ride, or have them contribute, 125, 250, or 400 a month. But when Lou was saying take care of your family, this is the type of thing that he had in mind. This is just a step-by-step strategy and execution plan to have it happen. And to conclude, start with the strategy, as I mentioned, then move to the execution phase. Take care of your family can begin with this. There are other ways to do it, but this is a good start. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me at gfym0324@gmail.com. Again, I don't use these videos as financial advice, even though I'm a financial advisor. But for specific recommendations, I have no problem, setting up a Zoom call with anybody. There's a couple of people who've emailed me about that already, so I have no problem doing that. So again, hope this helps. Hope this was educational. Giant hugs.